The palace was beautiful. The Mediterranean glittered outside her window like diamonds on blue silk. And Grace Kelly, Princess of Monaco, couldn't leave without permission. 6 months had passed since the wedding of the century. 6 months since 30 million people watched her walk down the aisle in a dress that cost more than most houses. 6 months since she'd said yes to Prince Rainier III and goodbye to everything else. The fairy tale, it turned out, had very specific terms and conditions. Grace stood at the window of her bedroom in the Palace of Monaco. It was November 1956. Outside, the harbour gleamed. Yachts bobbed in the water. Beyond them, the French Riviera stretched along the coast like a postcard of freedom. She could see it. She just couldn't reach it. Behind her, on the Louis XV dresser, sat a telegram. It had arrived that morning from Hollywood. Alfred Hitchcock. Her Hitchcock. The director who had made her a star, who had understood her in ways no one else ever had. He was making a new film. He wanted her. The role was perfect. The script was brilliant. It was everything she'd walked away from. Grace picked up the telegram again. Her hands trembled slightly. She'd read it 12 times already. Grace, stop wrote this for you. Stop, please come home. Stop Hitch. Come home. As if Hollywood had ever been home. As if anywhere had ever been home except the sets, the cameras, the lights, the moment when she stepped into another woman's life and forgot her own. She heard footsteps in the corridor. Heavy. Measured. Princely. Grace folded the telegram and slipped it into her pocket. By the time Rainier entered, she was sitting at her vanity, elegant and composed. The Ice Princess. The role she'd been playing since childhood, perfected in Hollywood, and now her prison uniform. Good morning, ma chérie. His French was flawless. Everything about Rainier was flawless. Handsome, educated, charming when he chose to be, and absolute in his authority. Good morning. Grace's voice was steady. Years of acting had taught her control. He moved behind her, placing his hands on her shoulders. In the mirror, they looked like a portrait. The Prince and Princess of Monaco. Perfection captured in glass. I have meetings all day, he said. State business. You'll join me for the Red Cross luncheon at 2. It wasn't a question. Of course. And this evening, dinner with the Italian ambassador. Wear the emerald set. Yes, darling. His hands tightened slightly on her shoulders. Not painfully, just enough to remind her. You're happy here, aren't you, Grace? She met his eyes in the mirror. Dark eyes. Loving eyes. Controlling eyes. Of course I am. He smiled, kissed the top of her head, left. Grace sat very still for a long time after he was gone. Then she pulled the telegram from her pocket and read it one more time. To understand how Grace Kelly became a prisoner, you need to go back 6 months. April 19th, 1956. The wedding was perfect. 600 guests filled the Cathedral of St. Nicholas. 2,000 journalists crowded the streets outside. 30 million people watched on television. Grace wore a dress designed by Helen Rose of MGM. Silk, lace, pearls, 125 yards of fabric. She looked like every little girl's dream of a princess. She felt like a woman walking to her execution. You're sure about this? Her maid of honor, Rita Gam, had whispered that morning while adjusting Grace's veil. It's too late to be unsure. Grace, I've made my choice, Rita. And she had. 3 months of courtship, 3 weeks of engagement, 3,000 decisions, none of which felt entirely like her own. Her father had negotiated the dowry, $2 million, as if she were a prize mare being sold. The studio had released her from her contract, their golden girl choosing a crown over the camera. Hitchcock had sent flowers and a note that simply said, "I'll be waiting." But Grace Kelly, who had spent her entire life trying to be perfect, who had never been good enough for her cold Olympic athlete father, who had clawed her way from Philadelphia society girl to Hollywood royalty through sheer determination and talent. Grace Kelly had finally done something that made everyone proud. She was marrying a prince. The fact that she barely knew him seemed irrelevant to everyone, including herself. Rainier had been charming during their courtship. Attentive. Romantic even. He'd flown to America to meet her family. He'd taken her to dinner, sent her flowers, written her letters. He'd told her she was beautiful, that Monaco needed her, that he needed her. He'd also told her quite clearly what he expected. "I need a Princess Grace," he'd said one night in Philadelphia after they'd announced their engagement. They were alone in her father's library. The house was full of congratulations and champagne. "Not an actress." "I understand." "Do you?" He'd taken her hand. "Monaco is a small country. We have complications, financial difficulties. The casino isn't what it was. We need stability, respectability, heirs." "I understand," she'd repeated. "Your acting career will end, I know." He'd smiled then, kissed her hand. "You're going to be wonderful." Grace had smiled back. In her mind, she was already rehearsing the role. Princess. It was just another part, wasn't it? She'd played a queen in The Swan just months before. How different could it be? She'd find out soon enough. May 1956. The first month was a honeymoon, literally. They sailed the Mediterranean on the royal yacht. They visited Corsica, Sardinia, the Italian coast. Rainier was attentive, affectionate. They made love in cabins that swayed with the waves. He told her about Monaco's history, its struggles, its dreams. He spoke of the children they would have, the life they would build. Grace played her part perfectly. The radiant bride, the princess in love, she wore beautiful clothes and smiled for photographers and learned French and pretended she didn't miss the camera with an ache that felt like physical pain. At night, alone in the bathroom while Rainier slept, she would stare at her reflection and wonder who she was becoming. The girl from Philadelphia was gone. The actress from Hollywood was gone. Princess Grace was emerging, elegant and proper and utterly empty. But it was only a month. She could adjust. She would adjust. Then they returned to Monaco. June 1956. The palace Grace discovered had rules. So many rules. Where she could go, when she could leave, who she could see, what she could wear, how she should speak, what causes she could support, which events she must attend, how long she should stay, when she should smile, when she should be silent. Every minute of her day was scheduled by the palace staff. Every public appearance was choreographed. Every word she spoke was scrutinized by the press, by the government, by Rainier's advisors, by Rainier himself. "You're the Princess of Monaco now," he explained when she questioned the restrictions. They were in his study. He was signing papers. She was standing by the window, watching people walk freely along the harbour. "Everything you do reflects on the principality." "I just wanted to have lunch with Rita," Grace said quietly. Rita Gam had come to visit. Grace hadn't seen her best friend alone since the wedding. "She can come to the palace." "I wanted to go to Nice, to a cafe, to feel like—" "Like what?" "Like myself," Grace wanted to say. "Like a human being instead of a museum piece. Like a normal person." Rainier set down his pen, looked at her. His expression was patient, as if explaining something to a child. "You're not a normal person anymore, Grace. You're a princess. My princess. Monaco's princess. You represent 1,000 years of history. You cannot simply go to a cafe. In Hollywood, you're not in Hollywood anymore." The words hung in the air between them like a guillotine. Grace turned back to the window. Outside, a woman walked past pushing a pram. Free. Anonymous. Ordinary. "I know," Grace said finally. That night, she received a call from Hitchcock. It was brief. He was filming in Hollywood. He missed her. He had a new project. Would she consider... Rainier took the phone from her hand before she could answer. "Mr. Hitchcock, this is Prince Rainier. I'm afraid Grace is no longer available for film work." "Yes, I understand. No, not even one film. She has responsibilities here. I'm sure you understand. Thank you. Goodbye." He hung up. Grace stared at him. "You had no right." "I had every right. I'm your husband. I'm also the sovereign prince of Monaco." "Your acting career is over, Grace. We discussed this." Discussing and deciding are different things. "I have decided." He said it gently, firmly, with absolute certainty. Grace felt something inside her crack, not break, not yet, just crack. A hairline fracture in the facade. "Of course," she said. "You're right. I'm sorry." Rainier kissed her forehead. "You'll adjust. It just takes time." July 1956. The scripts kept coming. Studios, directors, offers. They arrived by mail, by telegram, by phone. Every major production in Hollywood wanted Grace Kelly. Or rather, they wanted the woman Grace Kelly had been. The star. The muse. The actress who could convey more with a single glance than most could with pages of dialogue. MGM offered her $1 million for 3 films. $1 million, more money than most people saw in a lifetime. Grace held the contract in her hands. Read it 3 times. Imagined saying yes. Imagined standing on a set again. The lights. The camera. The blessed escape of becoming someone else. Then she set it on Rainier's desk. "What's this?" he asked. "A contract. MGM. $1 million. He didn't even pick it up. "And I wanted you to see it before I declined." "Why would you decline?" She looked at him. He was serious. He genuinely didn't understand why a woman would turn down $1 million, artistic fulfillment, and international fame. "Because I'm your wife," Grace said. "Because I'm the Princess of Monaco. Because you've made it very clear that my acting career is incompatible with those roles." "That's correct. So I'll decline." "Good." He returned to his paperwork. The conversation was over. Grace walked back to her rooms. On her bed lay the dress she would wear to that evening's state dinner. Emerald green. Elegant. Expensive. A costume for a role she would play for the rest of her life. She picked up the phone. Called her agent in California. "Tell MGM no," she said. "Tell them all no." "Grace, are you sure?" "I'm sure. I'm done. It's over." She hung up before she could change her mind. That night at dinner, she sat beside Rainier and smiled at dignitaries and spoke perfect French and played Princess Grace flawlessly. Inside, she felt the fracture widen. Still not broken, but spreading. August 1956. The palace staff loved her. That was something at least. The maids, the cooks, the gardeners, the drivers. They all adored Princess Grace. She learned their names, asked about their families, spoke to them with genuine warmth. She was kind, gracious, everything a princess should be. She was also desperately lonely. Rita had gone back to America. Other friends wrote letters but couldn't visit. Rainier's schedule for the princess was too demanding. Her family was an ocean away, and Rainier, while affectionate, was also increasingly absent. State business, government meetings. The work of ruling a tiny nation with enormous financial problems. Grace spent her days at charity events, ribbon cuttings, hospital visits. She smiled until her face hurt. She spoke until her voice felt foreign. She posed for photographs until she felt like a wax figure of herself. At night, she would stand at her window and look at the stars. The same stars that shone over Hollywood, over Philadelphia, over all the places she could no longer go. One evening, she found herself in the palace library. Hundreds of books lined the walls. Histories, philosophies, novels. She ran her fingers along the spines until she found what she was looking for. Rear Window had been adapted from a short story. She found a collection that included it. Sat in a leather chair. Read. And remembered. The set. The apartment. The costume. The white nightgown scene that had made her iconic. Hitchcock behind the camera, directing with just a gesture. Jimmy Stewart across the room. The moment when she'd stopped being Grace Kelly and became Lisa Fremont. She missed it with a physical ache. "What are you reading?" She looked up. Rainier stood in the doorway. Grace closed the book. "Nothing important? Come to bed." "In a moment." He frowned. "Grace." I said in a moment. It was the first time she'd spoken to him, with anything approaching sharpness. They both felt it. The shift. The resistance. Rainier's expression hardened. "Don't forget who you are." "I'm trying not to," Grace said quietly. "That's the problem." He left without another word. Grace sat in the silent library until midnight. Then she returned the book to its shelf and went to her rooms. In the mirror, Princess Grace stared back at her. Elegant. Composed. Perfect. Trapped. September 1956. The realization came slowly, then all at once. It was a Tuesday afternoon. Grace had just returned from a hospital visit. Sick children. She'd read them stories, held their hands, posed for photographs with their parents. It was good work. Important work. Work that mattered. It was also work that required her to ask permission to leave the palace, to have her route approved by security, to have her schedule coordinated with the government's calendar, to have her clothing selected by advisors, to have her words reviewed before she spoke. Them. She couldn't buy a dress without approval. Couldn't have lunch with a friend without it being scheduled weeks in advance. Couldn't take a walk without security. Couldn't make a phone call without wondering who might be listening. Couldn't read a script. Couldn't accept a role. Couldn't even dream about returning to the work she loved without it being a betrayal of her marriage, her title, her duty. Grace stood in her bedroom. The beautiful bedroom with its antique furniture and silk curtains and windows that overlooked a kingdom she could see but not touch. And understood. This was forever. This wasn't an adjustment period. This wasn't learning a new role. This wasn't a temporary sacrifice until things settled down. This was the rest of her life. She sat down slowly on the edge of the bed. Her hands were shaking. The room felt very small suddenly. The palace felt very small. Monaco felt very small. The entire world felt like it was shrinking to the size of a cage with gold bars and diamond locks. "Oh, God," she whispered, "what have I done?" There was no answer. There never would be. She'd made her choice. She'd walked down the aisle. She'd said, "I do." She'd signed the contract. She'd become Princess Grace. And Grace Kelly, the actress, the artist, the woman who'd been free to choose her own roles and her own life, had ceased to exist. The door opened. A maid entered with fresh towels. "Your Serene Highness, will you need anything else?" Grace looked at her. The maid was young, 18, maybe 19. Free to leave at the end of her shift. Free to go home, to see friends, to make her own choices. "No," Grace said. "Thank you. That will be all." The maid curtsied and left. Grace sat very still for a long time. Then she did what she'd always done when emotions threatened to overwhelm her. She pushed them down, locked them away, put on the mask. She was an actress, after all. She knew how to play a part, even if that part was slowly killing her. October 1956, Rainier found her crying. It was late. She'd thought he was asleep. She'd gone to the bathroom, turned on the water to mask the sound, and let herself break. Just for a moment. Just enough to survive another day. But he heard. He stood in the doorway. His expression was confused. Concerned. He'd never seen her cry. Not once. Not even on their wedding day when she'd said goodbye to everything she'd ever known. "Grace, what's wrong?" She couldn't stop. Couldn't put the mask back on fast enough. 6 months of perfect performance crumbled in an instant. "I can't do this," she gasped. "I can't. I thought I could, but I can't." He knelt beside her. "Can't do what?" This. Any of this. All of this. Being locked in this palace, needing permission for everything. Never being alone, never being free, never being... She stopped, looked at him. Never being myself. Rainier's face went very still. "You're my wife," he said carefully. "You're the princess of Monaco. I know. This is your duty. I know. You agreed to this. I know." She stood up, putting distance between them. "I know what I agreed to. I know what I am. I know what's expected of me. But knowing doesn't make it easier. It doesn't make it hurt less. It doesn't make me miss my life less. Your life is here now. My life was acting. My life was having choices. My life was being more than just someone's wife and someone's princess and someone's... Someone's what? Possession." The word hung between them like a grenade. Rainier stood slowly. His expression was no longer concerned. It was cold. The expression of a prince who'd been insulted by a subject. "I have given you everything," he said quietly. "A title, a palace, a position, respect. I have made you a princess. You've made me a prisoner. That's ungrateful. That's honest." They stared at each other. Two people who'd married for different reasons and were only now discovering the cost. "What do you want from me, Grace?" His voice was hard now. "Permission to go back to Hollywood, to make films, to abandon your responsibilities here." "I want to breathe," she whispered. "I just want to breathe. Then breathe. But breathe as Princess Grace, not as Grace Kelly. That woman doesn't exist anymore." He left. Grace sank back down to the bathroom floor. She didn't cry anymore. She was too empty for tears. That woman doesn't exist anymore. He was right. Grace Kelly was gone. The actress, the artist, the woman who'd stood in front of Hitchcock's camera and felt alive. She died on April 19th, 1956, in a cathedral full of flowers and cameras and people who thought they were witnessing a fairy tale. They'd been witnessing a funeral. November 1956. The telegram from Hitchcock arrived on a Tuesday. Grace read it alone in her bedroom. Rainier was in Paris on business. The palace was quiet. For once, she had a few hours without obligations, without eyes watching her, without the weight of the crown. She read the telegram 3 times. Then she sat at her desk and wrote a response by hand. "Dear Hitch, thank you for thinking of me. I'm honored. I'm always honored when you think of me. But I can't come home. This is my home now. Monaco, the palace, this role. I hope the film is wonderful. I hope you find the perfect actress. I hope she understands how lucky she is. I miss you. I miss the sets. I miss the work. I miss being Grace Kelly. But that woman is gone now. I'm Princess Grace. And Princess Grace doesn't make movies. She just lives in one. With love and regret, Grace." She folded the letter, sealed it, addressed it to Hitchcock's production office in Hollywood. Then she sat at her desk and looked at her hands. These hands had held Oscar statuettes and worn diamond rings and touched the faces of leading men in front of cameras that made her immortal. Now they just wore gloves and waved at crowds and signed official documents in a palace that felt more like a mausoleum every day. Outside her window, the Mediterranean sparkled. Beautiful. Unreachable. Grace stood, smoothed her dress, checked her makeup in the mirror, put on the mask, became Princess Grace. It was time for the Red Cross luncheon. She had learned her lesson well. The cage was permanent. The role was forever. The fairy tale was a lie. But she would play it perfectly. Because that's what Grace Kelly had always done. She'd always been perfect. Even when it killed her. Epilogue. 26 years later, Princess Grace would die on a winding road above Monaco. Some said it was a stroke. Some said the brakes failed. Some whispered that maybe, just maybe, a woman who'd spent a quarter-century trapped in a golden cage had simply decided to fly. But that September morning in 1982, as her car left the road and tumbled down the mountainside, perhaps Grace Kelly finally escaped. Or perhaps she'd died 26 years earlier in a cathedral in Monaco, in a dress made of silk and lace and broken dreams. That woman doesn't exist anymore. Rainier had been right. Grace Kelly ceased to exist on April 19, 1956. What remained was Princess Grace. Perfect, elegant, composed, and absolutely, completely, utterly trapped. The fairy tale, it turned out, was just another role. The longest she ever played. The one she could never escape. The palace was beautiful. The Mediterranean glittered like diamonds. And Grace Kelly, who'd given up everything for a crown, spent the rest of her life looking out windows at a freedom she would never touch again. That was Princess Grace, Hollywood's most beautiful star, Monaco's most elegant princess, the woman who traded her soul for a title and spent 26 years paying the price. 6 months. That's how long it took her to realize. Forever. That's how long she had to live with it.